Hello, Alan Ryder, Southeastern Railway Museum, and welcome to part 2 of our work on former CSX SD45-2 8954. And before we get into the gory details, credit has to be given to the person who is solely responsible for getting this locomotive donated to us, and that's Kevin Wood. Kevin is a longtime volunteer here and was manager of technical training at CSX's training center here in the Atlanta area. When CSX closed that facility about 6 years ago, Kevin was able to get the locomotive donated to us, and we are most grateful. Unfortunately, Kevin's on the road, so I haven't been able to have him in person on these videos, but I'm crossing my fingers that we can have him here for part 3, and yes, there will be a part 3. And with all that being said, we'll get into the work. In the course of our troubleshooting process, we find other unexpected little surprises. This is an example. This is those two wires hanging loose are the negative for the headlight, and they belong on that terminal right there, and it's burned up. So we can't use that one, that terminal, but there's plenty of empty ones, so we'll put a new end on that wire and put it in a different spot. The headlight negative draws a lot of power, so that's why these tend to burn up. There. New connectors put on the wires and relocated to an empty spot on the terminal board, so all is good for this one. One way to tell if you've got water in your lube oil is to look for condensate, and condensate has a tendency to show up in a big way. On the lid of the lube oil strainer assembly, most railroad people call this the ice cream freezer because it kind of looks like one. But if I can do this one-handedly, if you take the lid off, there's no pressure here, so when the engine's running, you can still take the cover off. But if you look at that, it's quite gray and milky, and that's an indication that there's water in the oil that has condensed on the lid of the lube oil strainer. So again, this was kind of a telltale sign that we have a problem. Now we got to find it. This valve right here is the engine lube oil drain. It even says so right there. And what I'm hoping is that when I open that valve, some of the water that may have separated out in the crankcase, we can drain it out into this here bucket. So we shall see what happens. Well, that's a good sign. We've got water, so a little bit, not much. That's not very much water. So we got maybe a pint, maybe a quart of water, and then it's sort of going straight oil. So a little bit of water separated out, not much. This is our setup for pressure testing the locomotive. Just a plain old garden hose with city water through a valve. I have a pressure gauge so you can see what we're doing. And that line goes right into the expansion tank through this valve here. And that valve is open. And what that valve normally is for is this pipe here. This pipe here is actually connected right there. And that's so you can vent the system before you put water in it. And pressure caps are normally rated, that I've seen, around either 7 or 13 psi. This pressure cap is 20 rated. So, you know, we're running about 16 psi-ish, so we're well within the range. The cap is already starting to relieve. You can see some water running out down there. So we're good on pressure testing. So we got the covers off here, and the engine's under pressure, and this is what we did to check for leaks in the power assemblies. This of course is number 10 power assembly. If you look back up in there, that's the outlet for the aftercooler. That's where the combustion air comes through. After it goes out of the turbocharger, it gets cooled there and then comes into the air box, which is what this is. And this is number 9 power assembly. And then down here, let me get a light. That's the crankshaft. And the number 9 and number 19, I believe, rods where they connect up. And again, we're looking around for, aim the camera right, we're looking around for leaks, and we haven't found any. And we've actually pressure tested the engine 3 times and rotated it around, and we simply are not finding any leaks in the engine. This box is nicknamed the ice cream freezer because it looks like one, and it's the lube oil strainer. And lube oil comes through the scavenging pump over there, goes through the filters, goes through the Lub Cooler, which is back over here, and into the strainer assembly. And one of the ways to check to see if you might have a bad Lub Cooler with water getting into the oil is you pull this up, and that drains the Lub Cooler, drains this box, and then you can look in and see this pipe, the outlet of the pipe. And I just did that, and I really can't see anything. I don't know that the camera can see it, but we'll give it a try. You're probably going to have to get really close. It's so difficult to see the outlet of this drain pipe. This is the drain from the return from the lube oil cooler that goes into the strainer box. And I went ahead and pulled the cover, strainer cover off, so you can see a little bit better in there. And we've got pressure on the locomotive now. And if you look down there, it's still really difficult to see, but that's the outlet for the return. And if there's any water that's gotten into the oil through the lube oil cooler, you ought to see it running out of there. And so far, I mean, we've got about 18 pounds on the locomotive. I'm not seeing anything. So again, it's really difficult to see, but hopefully you can get an idea of the return there. I bought myself a Boroscope, so we're going to try shoving that up into the pipe and see if we can see anything. I already tried it once and it didn't seem to be very helpful, but we'll give it a try. And this thing should be able to record what it sees, so we shall see. I got everything back together. Boroscope really didn't tell us a whole lot. So best I can tell, there's nothing wrong with this lube oil cooler. Just as information, this diagonal thing here is the lube oil cooler. And then below it, that's the lube oil filter assembly. There's I think 7 filters in there. And then this right here is the water expansion tank where water comes back after it's gone through the radiators. So water from the radiators comes in here, goes through the cooler and backed out to the water pump inlet. And again down there, that big pipe there is the outlet for the lube oil cooler that went into the strainer, and that's what we were shoving the Boroscope into. Explain a little bit about how the lube oil system on EMD locomotives work. There's actually 3 lube oil pumps. This one is called the scavenging pump, and it takes the oil out of the crankcase, pumps it through the strainers, oil cooler, and filters, not necessarily in that order, and back into the strainer box. From there, the main lube oil pumps, that's actually 2 pumps there, not 1. The outside one provides lube oil to lubricate the bottoms of the pistons. Squirts oil up there to keep them cool them off from the combustion. The inside one is the biggie, and you can hardly see it, but back in there, hopefully I'm focused, can't necessarily tell, but back in there is the main lube oil pump, and it pumps oil to the bearings and then up to the camshaft and rockers and all that other good stuff. And since we're having issues with low oil, EMD conveniently provides a place to tap into the discharge of the main lube oil pump, and that's what I've hooked up to. So I've got a pipe hooked up, and it goes out here to a pressure gauge, and when we get the locomotive started up, that should have fairly good pressure if the bearings are okay, and if that has good pressure, and this gauge is at the very end of all the lube oil passages, and it goes to the governor and to this gauge, and if the pressure's high here and low there, then we have a filter issue. If the pressure is low here and low here, then we have another problem. It may be bearings or some other issue. So that's what we're going to try to find out. Alright, we got it running. And with it running, we've got a 20-foot lube oil pressure out of the main pump. This is a good thing. The nut filter is here. So there's a good chance someone can step on the lube oil filter. Let's hope. Okay. When the lube oil on this engine goes through the cycle, through the engine and stuff, one of the last places it goes is to the turbocharger, which is kind of that way. And because the turbo is such a sensitive machine, EMD has several filters, and this is one of them. And to protect the engine, the last place that the line that goes to the governor, the oil line that goes to the governor, comes off downstream of this filter. So since I tested this thing and we had decent pressure at the main lube oil pump going into the engine, but not so good pressure coming out, there's a possibility that this filter is plugged. And so I'm going to replace it. And if you've ever had to deal with changing automotive oil filters, you know they can be a struggle. Well, this is a struggle on steroids. And those are all the tools I had to use, but I finally got it loose, I think. So we're going to go ahead and take it off. The new filter's down there, so here we go. Oil will go everywhere. Ugh. Threads must be a mile long. Got it. You know, if I grab this thing, it's going to slip out of my hand, so I've already filled it up with oil. And let's see if we can get it started. There we go. Now the instructions say, like they do on oil filters, hand tight. On this one it's half a turn, so let's see if we can do half a turn. With that, that should do it. So now we'll go ahead and start the engine up here in a little bit and see what we got. Okay, we've had this baby running, and it's good news. I can't talk over the racket of the engine, so what we're going to do here in just a second is we're going to start it back up. And you'll see that the pressure there is going to come back up the way it's supposed to, which is good news. It means that the only thing wrong with the oil pressure was the turbo lube filter was plugged. Well, more good news. I just put the old TH14 back in, and we'll swing over here, and we're set up to load. Generator filled up, and we have loading. This is the load regulator, and it's controlled by the governor, and they work together. The governor maintains engine speed, and if for some reason the engine speed's a little higher or a little lower than what the governor likes, it can adjust the load regulator to either put more load in the excitation system or take it off. And our problem, it's really hard to see. It's hydraulically operated. That's the hydraulic side of it, and then this is the potentiometer. You can just barely see the arm there, and it's in maximum field right now, which is pretty much where it lives. Our problem was when our oil pressure was so low that it was sitting in minimum field and very sluggish to move to maximum field as the engine was running. So that confused us, and that's why we thought the TH card was bad, but the TH card wasn't bad. Now that we got good oil pressure, the load regulator's where it's supposed to be. Well, that about wraps things up. Our biggest accomplishments this round is we got the lube oil pressure issue taken care of, and as far as the water in the lube oil, well, we haven't found anything there. We've pressurized the engine 3 times, twice when it was cold, once when it was hot. Didn't find anything in the engine. Took a real close look at the lube oil cooler, which is another suspect area. Didn't find anything there. So we haven't found anything. And one of the theories is that because the engine sat for a long time with the stack uncovered, that water's gotten into the turbo and leaked past the blades of the turbo into the exhaust manifold of the engine and down through open valves into the engine and into the crankcase. I've been around a lot of locomotives that were stored, and Class 1s aren't necessarily noted for doing what they're supposed to in covering stacks, and I haven't seen that, but that doesn't mean that's not what's happening. So I guess if you've ruled out all the probable, then there's a possibility it's the improbable, and we'll leave it at that. And with that, we'll close things out. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And if you're in the Duluth, Atlanta area, please come and see us. And like and subscribe if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thank you very much. Before closing out, credit needs to be given to all the Railway Museum volunteers who've been helping out on this project. In this photo, left to right is Felix, Ryan, Chris, and Mike. Not in the photo because he was on the road is Elijah. And of course, last but not least is Kevin Wood, who has an awful lot to do with where we are now.